Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for braving the weather and the rain to make it. Ernest, thanks for having me. What we are going to talk about today is the professional services piece of software implementations. And specifically, I'm going to focus on professional services arms of software companies. So I know some of you work for software companies, some of you implement software. There's a few nuances, we'll get through that. So even if you don't work for a software company, I think there's going to be a lot of good nuggets that you should be able to get out of this presentation. My name is Tobias. I want to walk you through the agenda real quick. I'll just give you just a quick summary of who I am, what I do, and then I've put together this professional services success formula. I'll tell you a little bit more how they came about. But as part of this formula, there are a few components. There's 5 components in this formula, and I'm going to walk you through all the components of the formula, and then at the end I'll pull it all together for you. If there's one thing that you remember in this presentation, if there's one thing you want to walk away with, is you cannot focus just on one of those components. You have to focus on all of them. Okay? So we'll talk a little bit more about that. We'll have some Q&A at the end, time permitting. But if there's something that I talk about that you have an immediate question on, right? We're amongst friends here. Feel free to just ask the question, and we'll have a discussion on that. Okay? So this is the slide this is a shameless self-promotion a little bit here, but I've spent my entire career in enterprise software and professional services. The first 10 or 15 years I worked for implementation partners or implementation consulting companies, for enterprise software companies, and then the last 10 or so years I've worked, more or less as the leader of professional services for software companies. I've done that for quite a bit of time, and my focus really is I'm not the one that comes in if something is 80% there and gets it to 100%. I like to work with companies who are fast growing. I help build something from scratch. In most cases, I help tweak maybe some of these components for companies. But in a lot of cases, I actually come in and fix, what has, been put in place for years and years and years. So I've done that for, 6 or 7 different software companies, and then late last fall, I decided to just kind of go out on my own. And it's been going really well so far. And so I founded what I call the Delivery Advisory Group. And what I really do is I do fractional leadership. So I am right now the fractional vice president of professional services for a $20 million software company up in Charlotte. I do that 3 days a week. I also, I'm the fractional chief operating officer for actually a technology lab that was founded here. So I do a lot of assessments and working with companies to really help you get to the next level. So I've done a lot of offshoring, onshoring, nearshoring type of work. But that's enough of the shameless self-promotion. Let's get into this. So this is the formula. So here's the funny part on the formula. I'm German, and my friend Albert put a formula together, right? You guys are familiar with that? So I figured if he can put a formula together, I'm going to put a formula together. It remains to be seen which formula will have a more profound impact going forward. But a little bit of history, right? When you build or you fix something and you do it over and over again, right? People are saying, why are you doing it this way? Why are you doing it that way? And when you do this multiple times, even without realizing, I followed certain steps. I followed certain, a certain recipe to do that. And what I found is I did it successfully the first time. Then the second time when I did it for another company, I pretty much said, I already have it. I replicated it. And by the way, that didn't go that well, because what you're going to find out, there's no really one size fits all in a lot of these areas. But to make a long story short, there's 5 components we'll walk through. There's an S, there's a C, an E, a P, and then a CIR. I'll let you kind of guess what that is. And they're all really necessary. So this is something that I just, didn't make up and then try to make it work. I've done this for many years, and then I kind of, created a formula, kind of reverse engineering. It's something that, here's a little recipe, and I think my son can attest I'm not a cook at all, but from an analogy standpoint, there are a lot of ingredients. So I'm going to walk you through what the ingredients are, and then the key really is you may have all the ingredients, you may have all the directions, right? But when the first time you're going to go through a recipe and you're not a cook, you're probably not going to do too well. So there's definitely experience required to make sure that you have the right amount of ingredients, and you stir you stir things at the right time. But it's something that can be learned. It's something that can be taught. There's really no magic there. So all 5 components are really necessary. So I'm going to jump into the first one, which is S. Any guesses on what maybe S stands for? Should be pretty straightforward.
Software?
No, actually no.
Service.
Support.
Strategy.
Strategy.
So, so I'll go to the next slide. So, I'm talking specifically here about the professional services strategy. Okay, so there's obviously a company strategy. If you're a software company, you have a certain strategy in place, and how do you deploy products? How do you do it? So the S stands for the professional services strategy. And so a couple things surrounding the strategic aspect. I spent a lot of time with my customers on that, because decisions that you make here will have a profound impact on everything else that you're going to set up. Professional services really exists for one reason only, right? To make sure that you get customers successfully implemented. You can think about it in any way, you can slice and dice it any way, but that's really the only reason that you exist, is to take something, whether you build it on your own or something that your company's already built, and you successfully get customers to use that software, right, in their day-to-day life. One size does not fit all. So there are a few components I'm going to walk through, and a few strategies, but how you set this up has major implications. There are professional services teams for software companies that are a profit center, right? You have a revenue target, you have a margin target. A lot of the companies that I work with have that. There's other companies, they don't really care about the professional services revenue. They just want you, they look at you as a cost center, and they really look at you just as an enabler to get the software implemented so you can get to ARR. Annual recurring revenue, right, is really the key when you talk about software and software as a service. So there are some companies that operate at a loss on the professional services side, or maybe break even, just so they can get to the ARR quicker. There is really no standards in place when actually the ARR, the revenue starts ticking when you're a software company. A lot of companies actually don't start getting revenue until the customer is live. I worked with a couple of customers where we actually did it the other way. When you think back in the old enterprise, perpetual license models, where the minute you signed the deal, you sent them maybe a link to it, and you started recognizing that revenue. So a lot of companies these days are moving towards where the ARR actually starts at the time of closure, deal closure, versus implementing, right? So you can already see how you may think about this differently depending on whether revenue starts ticking in. And then there's all these hybrid situations, right? I think if you are just a professional services firm, right, you live and breathe with your professional services numbers, right? So of course you can't afford to be a cost center. You have to be a profit center. But a lot of these companies have these hybrid models in place right now. I've worked with a couple of software companies who actually say, we're gonna do your implementation for free. But are they really doing it? No, they're baking the cost of that into the subscription up front, right? So you as a customer feel very good about, hey, I'm gonna it's a tough conversation to say it's going to cost you $1 million for the software and it's going to cost you another $300,000 to implement. It's a different different model when you say, it costs you, $1.25 million all in, right? You don't have to worry about paying for the implementation. It's already included. So some people do that. So there's a lot of different ways you can slice and dice it, and depending on how long it takes you to deploy, depending on your industry, depending on your maturity, you may think of this a different way. But it has major implications down the road in how you structure your team, how you manage the team. The good news here is you can set this up one way, and then what I'm finding out, I usually get involved when a company has been around 5, 6, 7 years. They may have anywhere from 5 to 50 million in revenue, and you can still make changes then. It just takes a little bit while to move towards that. So, don't be too terribly worried about it up front. You can tweak that later. It's not easy, but you can certainly tweak it later. The last thing I think to mention here is, if you really have a product that's heavy to implement, let's say at least 4 to 6 months, a couple $100,000, right? There is value, a ton of value that you provide for the customer to implement that. So I've talked to a lot of CEOs, and they're going, I wish I would have charged more for professional services up front. Because honestly, if you don't charge for something, people don't see the value then, right? But if I'm saying, whoa, no, this is a $30,000 session, or this is a $500,000 implementation, now they're putting their resources towards it, right? They're thinking about this very, very differently. So a lot of different ways to think about this, but that's really the foundation and the initial discussion. How do you price your services? Are they free? Are they cheap? Are they built into the software? If not, how do you structure that? Are you making money? Are you not making money? You're just breaking even? You just care about getting to ARR? When do you get to the ARR, right? So this is not a 5-minute discussion typically. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? So the next component is C. What's C?
Cost or customers?
Customers?
Or culture or communication? Customer.
Remember, the only reason you exist in professional services is for a customer. One of my favorite sayings is, the customer may not always be right, but they're never wrong. There's a big difference, a subtle difference, but really a big difference. So, you all deal with customers, and they're all very, very demanding. Does it really mean you have to jump and do absolutely everything that they say, without notice, even if it's unrealistic? No. But when a customer gives you feedback, a customer talks to you, you gotta listen, right? They're never wrong. Even if you think they're wrong, they're never wrong. There's something there. So the customer aspect is key. This component really is all about getting things done. It's all about what I call delivery. You may also hear not just professional services, you may hear customer onboarding, you may hear delivery, right? It's all more or less the same. One of the biggest part of making sure that a customer is successful, and I see this over and over and over again, is that the expectations just aren't set. If you don't explain to a customer how this gets done, you may have a couple bumps here down the road. The most important, the trickiest part is maybe the data migration, right? You'll have to iterate through that 3 times, right? For example, you got to set the right expectation early and often. It starts in the sales process. I deal with a lot of sales folks who are minimizing, the complexity sometime. Of course, you're not gonna go through, here's the 30 things that can go wrong, but I think you have to be realistic. You have to be absolutely realistic and set that right expectations. Even if there's something that is not right, if there's something that is going to be a challenge going forward, when you start talking about it early and often, you can recover. You can recover from that. Oversight and governance is critical. Some of you may work for smaller companies, some of you for larger companies. So I'll give you a couple things. When you run 2 or 3 projects or 2 or 3 implementations, fairly easy to understand what's going on, right? It's right here. You can probably track it on a whiteboard, right? So I've worked with customers that have 600 implementations go on any given time, Now, there may not be multi-million-dollar implementations, there may be $10,000, $20,000 implementations, but you gotta have your hands around the 600 implementations, right? I work with customers who have 5 or 6 implementations going on, but they are $5 million each, right? So the oversight and governance there, you need a system in place. You know, you can't do things on a whiteboard, you can't do things in a spreadsheet. There are professional services automation tools out there. One mistake that I see companies that are smaller and growing make over and over again is they minimize this, and you know, they grow so fast and they, at the end of the day, have no idea what's really going on. One of the companies that I'm a fractional VP for right now, to give you an idea, it's probably a $15 million company, okay? Probably 80 projects go on at any given time. I come in and I'm supposed to fix what's going on, and they're about ready to double over the next year. So a lot of things going on. I mean, no one could tell me, here's the list of projects that we're working on. They didn't build the foundation, right? They pretty much had a team of 20 people, they're all sitting together, everyone is playing multiple roles, and to them it was very clear who's doing what, but there was no visibility and transparency to the executive team, there was no transparency to the board about what's really going on, but one escalation after the other, right? One demand after the other, to the point where we're implementing a professional services automation tool right now, NetSuite, for them. I pretty much said anything that's not on my golden spreadsheet, that before it goes into NetSuite, no one is working on. And I'm finding out, even after a couple, 3 weeks, I'm finding out Miles is still working on this project. Now this is externally facing project with a statement of work and customer expectation, right? So oversight and governance becomes very, very important, especially if you have a volume business or you're going to start having more than 3 or 4 or 5 implementations. You really got to get a handle on that. Feed in building. So when I work with enterprise customers, right, or customers that are large to you, not every customer is created equal, by the way, right? You may have 100 customers and 20 or probably 80% of your revenue, or there's some crazy stats that you can probably run. I work again with a couple of companies. Everything's done remotely, right? This is 2018. We don't even have to sit down with the customer. We have a couple of video conferences and constant phone conversations and emails back and forth. But we have a couple of customers that are worth millions of dollars a year. So I'm a big proponent of feet in building. Go see them. It takes you $1,000 to fly anywhere in the United States, spend 3 or 4 days with a customer. You can even eat for that price, I'm telling you. $1,000 for a customer that's worth to you $500, maybe that's not the best investment. But these are customers who are 10, 15, 100,000, $1 million worth to you, and then you ooh and ah about, should I go see them, shouldn't I go see them? The minute you have that conversation, go see them. Go see them, sit down with them, have some discussions early and often with these customers. Executive support. As I work with software companies, some of them are still in the stages where the founders are involved. Some of them are beyond that stage, right, where the founders have already more or less cashed out and they're gone. But executive support is absolutely critical. Have any of you run into a situation where you set the right expectation with the customer, or you enable the team to do that? The customer's not happy, makes one phone call to the guy in the corner office, picks up the phone and pretty much just, agrees to everything that you just worked very hard not to do, right? It happens all the time. But they get involved, they try to fix something, and they actually make things worse, right?
Yes, I think one of the things too is that talk to different levels of the customer if you can, because their motivation or their goal for the project may be different. And so as you're delivering back to them the expectations, the CFO, of course, has one motivation, CEO another one, the operations guy different one, and trying to understand all of those and make sure you're delivering back to them.
That's a really good point. What I see is, you have a project manager or someone like that on your team that works with probably an equivalent on the other side. most companies don't have relationships at the right levels. Most of the people that actually implement from the customer and may not even been involved in the sales process, right, with the software. Or as a matter of fact, they don't even want the software to get implemented, right, because it's change for them, right. So you got to make sure you have the right, the right level of conversation at the right levels. Absolutely. So this is really about delighting your customers. A couple things here. You can have a crappy product and you have great customer expectations, great customer management. You can get away with it for a while. You have a great product and crappy professional services, crappy customer service, you're dead. So ideally you want a great product and you want great customer service, but I'm telling you, there's ways to handle customers even if the product isn't right there, because we all know it's software, it breaks, right? You try a feature and it's not quite there yet, or things break, right? So having the right expectation set with these customers, delighting them, not just implementing and saying, I've done my statement of work, check, 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 but are they successful? And making them feel good about working with you, right? If you make a mistake, admit it to them. If you do this right, especially on the software side and the professional services side, in order for you to get the next customer, one of the prospects wants to talk to one of your current customers. It's called a reference, right? No one's going to say, I'm going to pay you $1 million or even $100,000 without talking to someone, right? And so you do this right, you have the right expectations, you take care of customers. That $1,000 trip you just took, it's a $50,000 deal the next month. So a lot of companies talk about CSAT, customer satisfaction, as you continue to grow as a company. NPS, you'll hear Net Promoter Score over and over again. So that's pretty much the industry standard customer success metric. That tells you not just is the customer happy or not, but they'll tell you, are they actually a promoter or are they a detractor, right? So your professional services company or your professional services arm of a software company, who works with the customers? Your employees, your associates, right? I hate the word resources, but they have to be engaged, right? They have to be educated, not just, they went to Harvard and they have this background, right? But they have to be educated on your company, your product, your process. This is who interacts with your customers, right? Happy employees, happy customers. It's not happy customers and happy employees, it's the other way around. You gotta take care of the folks that work with your customers. Do they have the right skill sets? I work with a lot of companies that are putting people in front of customers that should never be talking to a customer. Maybe not quite yet, right? We all love our technical teams, right? But there's not many of those that I can put in front of a customer to actually help with something. And so, do they have the right skill set? Do they say the right things? I work with a lot of consultants right now, and I'm on some phone calls listening in, and I cringe when they say certain things, and they're just not polished. It doesn't come across well. The word "like" is in every third word is "like." If I'm a customer, it doesn't come across too well. Now keep in mind, you may be small. You may have 5 people, 50 people, 100 people, but you have enterprise customers, right? So I've been around where the company was 15 people, but it was an insurance carrier who was the customer. Right? I can't treat them like I'm a 15-person startup, right, and show up and just kind of wing it. They're expecting you to handle them a little bit different. And so, do you have the right skill sets in place? Do you have the right personalities in place? Absolutely key. And let's talk about employees. Are they satisfied? Workplace studies show that people aren't satisfied. Why aren't they satisfied? They're never really onboarded correctly. You don't train them. There's no, a lot of certain generations want, they want to talk about what's next before you haven't even talked to them about what you need them to do in the next 2 years, right? And so, show them what needs to happen. Give them feedback. I sit down with companies, and no one ever gave them constructive criticism. How do they get better? Is it a fun conversation to say, Tristan, you know what, you really messed up here. You know, it's not a fun conversation to have, but you're doing this with the right intent, right? To help teach, to help grow. So training and coaching, you know, we can have a separate discussion just on that. Very, very critical. What perks? You know, you're a software company, you're a professional services company. You know, it's not a job where you have to be at 9 o'clock and leave at 5. Are you giving people flexibility? What perks are there? Can they wear T-shirts and jeans? You know, every software company has the foosball tables and the the Nerf guns, right? But that's not a differentiator anymore, right? What are you doing to take care of your customers, right? Your employees. And then management strength and depth. As you grow to a certain size, you need to have managers in place. You need to have directors in place that handle certain functions. How many times have you seen the best individual contributor is knocking out of park? You did so well, I'm going to promote you to manager. And now you're in charge of 10 people, you have no idea how to manage people, you actually don't even want to do it, but you didn't say no because I think I should be a manager, right? It sounds really cool. So what's your management strength and depth? Again, a couple companies I work for, this management depth right now is 0, right? So how do I teach people, or do I have to bring in some from the outside? Now bringing in some from the outside who's the manager, now everyone is pissed because I didn't give you the opportunity to do it. But management strength and depth, there comes a scale where you need good people in place that can just handle certain things for you. This is tricky to manage. It really is. It can be, the most frustrating, but also the most rewarding part of working when you work with folks and you help them grow. Maybe eventually you move on and they want to come work with you again, right? So it's very tricky to manage, but again, you can have the best software in the world, I'm telling you right now, but if you don't have the right people working with a customer, game over. Okay?
Yes. On that note, I was just doing a little bit of research yesterday on some cloud companies, and it was interesting. They talked about the product, right? And that was, what was really interesting was, this was more from an investment perspective. And then, strangely enough, the author went to the employee engagement of the company. And ironically, basically, his recommendation was this one company over 4 others, just because their Glassdoor score was so high. He said it's amazing. These it's, and so he said, of these 4 cloud companies you think investing, and the founder was still there. So there were 2 reasons why he said basically, and the founder owns 20% of the company. This is a $1 billion company. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was kind of interesting, your point about engaging with the employees and that kind of thing. It's if they're not basically all engaged, they're not going to go delight the customer.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that was really interesting.
Yeah, I just wanted to share the coolest perk I've ever heard of. I heard about it this week in an interview. That this company is a $15 million company based in the Midwest, and they provide maid service for their families, for all their employees every other week, because they said if they give them the cash, they're not going to spend it on that, and it helps keep their home in order, which helps keep the employee more grounded. I thought that was
that's awesome.
Awesome.
Makes sense. Yeah. Word.
While we're on it, I figured I'd ask someone else to dig back on it. But the management strength and depth, do you have a tool that you measure that? If you're looking at a company, looking at their internal employee.
I love tools, I love process, but I haven't run across something that I think you talk to people, you see if you walk around, you do what is it called, +1 or +2s, where or skip level.
Yeah.
You can have skip level meetings where you're the employee, I'm the manager, you're the VP. You guys are meeting together without me, so maybe you get a different perspective on it. But it's that's a tough one.
I agree, because I feel it's innate. I've just come across recently a lot of executive CEOs that believe, you know, if you didn't test a certain way, like, you know, I'll give a personal example. I was reminded recently that I tested really well on something, so my CEO wasn't surprised. I mean, compliments in there somewhere, but I was like, okay, I was like, so you're telling me, so if I don't learn a new skill because I didn't test on it, you don't have the proof on paper, you're not going to recognize what I could be like crushing over here.
You know, I'm gonna say something completely politically incorrect for a second. I've been PMP certified for, you know, since 2002. I was one of the first, I think, 30,000 in the world. And I've worked with great PMPs, and I know PMPs. I wouldn't, you know, trust them to, you know, run a company picnic. So certifications, okay?
Yes.
So certifications, yes. You know, you gotta have a certain, you gotta have the education, you gotta have this, you gotta have that. But I care more about when I look for employees or when I hire. I really look at, you know, there's a lot of things I can teach. There's a lot of things you can teach your employees. There's a, you know, but caring, you know, taking care of yourself, taking care of customers, and being proactive, and, you know, working in a team. You can't see this on a resume, right? That's, you know, those are the one-on-one discussions. So
Interview process and references from other people who are around them is the way
Absolutely.
we do it. I don't know of any way that you could
no.
Test it.
test it. I mean, you can have management skills assessments, like where
Yeah.
this is where you think you are, or we may grade them. You know,
Right.
you know, you can talk well with people, or you can coach people, but man, we've got teams in our company that that's a great one. These four really good, and these.
Right. So the key really is what sets them apart. What are the 3 or 4
Right.
characteristics? And so I look more for those characteristics than sometimes that, you know, what they have been done before. But it's a good point. I mean, that could be a separate topic for another time. But I just read an article this morning on LinkedIn about machine learning, and, you know, these bots that scan all these resumes right now. That's going to be the future. And I'm going, really, you're looking for certain keywords, and then you can't look me in the eye when I have a conversation, right? Like, probably can't put you in front of the customer. So very tricky, but you know, again, we're not talking about a plug and play implementation. We're talking about, you know, a people business that you're really in. So absolutely critical. The 4th component is P. You're not going to get that. P.
Process.
No,
Process.
that's part of it. So I call it practice. And what I mean by practice, I don't mean you have to practice a skill set, right? When you run a professional services group, there's practice areas, right? You may have a project management group, you may have a consulting group, right? We'll talk a little bit about different delivery models, but this practice aspect is one that is usually ignored. And again, this is one of my passions I can talk about for a long time, but in the interest of time, I'll just spend 5 minutes on this. Again, this ties back to the first conversation, the strategy, right? If you're going to be a profit center, right, you better start managing your revenue. How do you manage your revenue? I work for a company right now where the CFO has forecasted professional services revenue for 15 years. I said, why is the professional services leader not involved? Why is the bean counter, right? And he's very good, right? But it should be the responsibility. If I'm in charge of margins, I should be the one telling what the revenue is. I should know what my backlog is. I should know what the sales pipeline is, right? So, but even if the P is not something that you worry about, you got to manage cost. Who manages the cost aspect of it? The margins, utilization. You know, what's your team's utilization? By the way, what should it be? Couple companies I work with right now, they don't even have utilization goals. And then utilization, what are we talking about? Are we talking billable utilization? Are we talking overall utilization? Right? So there's a lot of things to think about. But when I look at my professional services dashboard, right, I should know 4 or 5 key metrics or KPIs that I have to measure. Delivery model. Again, one size doesn't fit all, but there's really only 2 or 3 ways you can slice how you work with customers. So you have a team of 10, 15, 20, 100, 1,000, I don't care. There's only really a couple ways you can slice and dice it. So, You can organize, surrounding a geographic region. Do you do national work, so you have someone in charge of professional services for North America, someone completely different for, EMEA. Or, a lot of companies, bless you, a lot of companies have, you're in charge of the West Coast, you're in charge of the East Coast, and then everyone reports into that. That's one way to manage it. Where are your customers, by the way? If you're a New York-based company or Charleston-based company, and all your customers are in California, remember feet in building. I'm going to just say, you probably should have someone there permanent, right? That can be there. Do you have a shared services model, or are you organized by product? So let's just say you have 5 products, you have 100 consultants. So are you specializing people in a product? There's no right or wrong answer, by the way, right? Or are you organizing people by, shared service? You're a project manager, it doesn't matter what product. You're going to manage these across the board, right? You're a consultant, you work across 2 or 3 of these products. So you have, and this evolves as you continue to grow and your product portfolio, extends. Do you have a product that is literally out of the box? It just has to get configured and implemented? Do you customize the product? How do you deal with the customization aspect, of that? That's a complete different ballgame now, right? That you're probably dealing with. Do you do everything in-house, onshore? Are you offshoring? You're working in India, in the Philippines, in Eastern Europe. I have some war stories I can share there. There's certainly some things that are super conducive to outsourcing and offshoring, and other things aren't. Most companies, the pendulum goes from here to here, and then it comes back, right? So we can talk more about that. Do you have tools in place to manage all that stuff? What's your capacity model? What's your cost structure? Again, very, very critical piece. And then, again, this could be a separate session just here. What's your implementation process? What's your methodology? The company I work for right now, they've been around for 15 years. They have 80 projects going. There's no methodology. How did it get done? I don't know. You guys just work together and figure it out. Which worked for 10 projects. It worked for 10 projects, even big projects, but now there's 80 of them. So I'm taking them, from 10 projects, and I'm going to say, okay, we're going to build something that's for 50 projects. Why? Well, because we have 40 things in the pipeline. We got to continue to grow. The 5 of you can't do this anymore, right? We have to document this. And by the way, John is a single point of failure. He leaves, he goes on vacation next week, nothing gets done. So repeatability and scalability for methodology, we can talk about custom development, agile, and all that stuff, but I'm talking really about an implementation process. Talking about the pendulum swinging from one extreme to the other, it also depends, all this depends on the maturity of the company. That's why you just can't jam something that works at benefit focus in at Atlas software right now. We have different maturities, different dynamics going on. So very important that you have that. Roles, what's the roles and mix? So how many project managers do you have compared to consultants? How many, it's very simple from a development standpoint. You should have so many QA to development, right? But the same concept applies to the rest of your teams. So right now, again, a couple of customers I work for, their mix is like backwards. I have all these project managers right now. I have two project managers for every consultant. Well, I'm a project manager by background, right? So, but who's getting the work done? Not the project manager. So I have all these project managers organizing everything, but nothing is really getting done. I was like, we need to flip this, right? So roles and mix, and then partners. As you continue to grow, are you going to implement everything on your own? Are you going to outsource certain things? Are you going to bring implementation partners in that maybe just do things for you? The model that I'm running for them right now is, they're tripling here over the next year, and some of these deals are this big, and some of these deals are more like volume-based, transactional deals. So let's talk about partners. Maybe they can take care of a certain slice of your customers. again, probably not your top 5 customers, right? That you're going to let them work with, right? But if there are, you have this pyramid of these, of these customers. There's a lot of noise down here, right? So why don't you bring a partner in to help you maybe implement that?
Our industry is gone from 12-month implementations to now a cloud solution that is moving to like a 3 to 4 month implementation, which really affects our revenue because we are the service company. We don't do any product, right? So we're playing around with that affects our utilization, right? We got to sell more deals for these cloud short implementations.
Yeah.
Are you seeing a mix of, because a lot of times you can use a partner or a subcontractor, you don't have to pay them when they're not working, right? So we're looking at our mix of W-2 employees compared to subcontractors and that mix. Have you seen companies, how they're handling that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think the days where you do everything in-house is over, right? I think there was a huge, there's a huge trend towards outsourcing, but I think that's coming back again because companies are trying to figure out what can I really outsource. Just to give you an example, I'm a big believer that there's key skills that have to be in-house, right? So for example, I'm not a big believer in bringing a contract project manager in, although you can do that, but like a contract consultant that understands your product, like that should be the skill set of your company, right? So maybe that's not something that you want to outsource, right? But maybe there's some people on the team, right, that work kind of behind the scenes, they do some development, they do some testing, right? If someone were to go or someone, the workload isn't there, you can handle it that way. But there's probably some key skill sets and some key employees that I think you got to have in-house.
If you have a true methodology, there's no way to really bring in a PM, an outside PM that doesn't know your methodology, right? I mean, that would be.
I honestly, I slightly disagree with that.
Okay.
I think, so I just hired 6 project managers over the last 2 weeks at this company, so they went from 2 to 8. And today is day 4 for one of them. He's running 6 projects. Wow. So I think project managers, project managing can get up to speed a lot faster, right? Because they do project management. They're not the product expert now. The consultants and product experts takes a little bit longer, but project managers, you got to look for the right person, right?
Right.
So you have someone that comes from a $20,000 company. I deal with Charlotte right now, and if I see one more resume from Wells Fargo, right, corporate, that's very different than being a fast-growing software company, right? So there's project managers that can handle that, but you got to figure out where they are.
Right. I guess, were they close in the methodology that the company uses? I mean, there had to be some kind of correlation between those methodologies, or you had to teach it really quick?
Well, I think this comes back to characteristics. Now keep in mind, there's not a whole lot of methodology, right, in place in this dynamic right now. Right. So in this dynamic, I'm looking for people who are problem solvers, who are getting things done, who are not paralyzed. So you got to look for people who are not paralyzed by this methodology, but someone who is flexible and can figure it out. And by the way, a methodology to me is nothing more but an enabler, right? So maybe
it's a framework.
It's a framework.
Right.
So we're kind of running out of time, so just really quick. CIR. So you have these 4 components that you can control, that we just talked about. But when you work for software companies, there's critical internal relationships that you got to deal with. Sales is your oxygen. Working with a sales team can be exhausting. I spent the last 2.5 days with 30 salespeople. I can't drink anymore. But the sales team is your oxygen, right? You have to look at them not as, oh my God, what did they do again? But you gotta be on board with them, because if they don't sell, you're done, right? So contracts, terms, estimates, proposals, help them be a partner, help them close deals. But we also had some very tough conversations about, I need you to please do this and don't do that, right? So the sales team, and I'm going through this fast, the sales team is critical. Then you have partners. You have a product management team or development team, right, over here. If you're a software company, you got, what features are coming, how fast are these features coming, how good is the quality, is the the quality may be crap. If I know the quality is crap, but it's getting released on Tuesday, I know probably what to do with my customers versus assuming everything is perfect, right? So very, very close interaction with product development, product management. Customer success, I have a little star on there. That's like the big term these days. Customer success, professional services could be part of customer success. You really have from post-sale all the way to, never ending. That's really customer success. A lot of companies, customer success is just account management and, and support right now. So what I'm saying here is, got to have a close relationship with account management, with support, with handoffs, absolutely critical. And then these last two functions are your partners, right? An HR team. Like I couldn't do what I'm doing right now with this customer right now if they can't help me recruit and they can't help me hire and they can't help me onboard. I gotta be lock and step with finance. I own a P&L, right? So I gotta work with the finance guy, right, to make sure that I have enough budget for it, right? If I don't have enough budget, help me get more budget to do that. So, so the first four components we talked about, you can control more or less on your own. But if you don't do this right, this is your relationships and boundaries with other groups. You won't be successful. And last but not least, this is really just what we talked about. This is more of a graphical representation of how it all comes together. You have your strategy on top that drives 90% of what you're doing. You have these three areas that you control on top of that. And then you have these other functions that you have to work with very, very closely. So all of these components are probably worth an entire separate discussion, when appropriate, but this is the discussion that I'm having with a lot of software companies. We can do an assessment, right? We can go through that. And remember what I told you at the very beginning? You won't be successful if you just take care of one of them. Hopefully that makes sense right now. You can have the best employees, but if you don't have customer satisfaction, you're a host. You can have your best practice delivery model, right? But if you don't have an interaction with the right sales team, you're dead. So think of it this way. When you assess your own company or as you build your own company, don't worry about taking care of one aspect and go really, really deep and then go to the next one. My recommendation to you is put these components next to each other and go across, slice it this way, right? So if I were to come in and talk to any company, I don't spend time just talking about one aspect. I got to understand the dynamics all the way across. Make sure that you have some sort of delivery methodology, delivery model in place. You have employees, you have a product, right? And look at it this way versus focusing just at one component at a time. So that really, I think, wraps it up. I apologize for talking so fast and trying to catch us up.
The previous slide was amazing how it tied it all together. It really, you could just walk away with that one page.
So yeah.
And just kind of,
Yeah.
think about how you're running your operation.
That's the slide that I walk around with and say, this is the $1 million slide.
Right. Any questions basically before we wrap up? And I thought it was an excellent presentation. Questions? Tobias will be here for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I'll be around.
I actually have a quick question.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure I understand your business model correctly. So you are contracted out by the product companies to deliver professional services, or are customers buying products and asking you to implement it?
No, not the latter, but not the first either. I usually work with CEOs or with the executive team, and I come in and I'll either run the professional services team, maybe fractionally, right? Or I help them implement or fix any of these components.
I see. Okay.
But I'm not an certified implementation provider for Oracle, right? That's what these guys do, right?
Okay. So you are working with the companies. You're managing their teams.
I can work the teams in an interim model, right? I don't want to do it full time, right? Or in most cases, I come in and fix certain components or help them implement that model so they think of it, holistically.
Okay.
Yeah.
identify and address the issues that they're seeing at a particular point in time with their growth. Because he and I are methodology and engagement, right? So methodology was probably the next to last thing that our company did well, and engagement was probably the last thing that our company's done well.
Yeah.
So that's why we're interested in this, because we did most of the other stuff, and we've been in business 20 years, most of the other stuff kind of happened. And we did get pretty good engagement when we were small, because everybody knew each other, and we started growing, like, uh-oh. So that's just more of a comment rather than a question.
Yeah.
But I think to your point, you know, you just talked about basically, you don't have to do it all in-house. So you've got these consultants, as you guys do, basically scattered around the country, around the world.
Mhm.
How do you keep that level of engagement up when you're meeting once, twice a year? I mean, you know, basically, and culturally, you know, how do you convey that? That is a huge issue.
Yeah, I mean, these days, you know, I always say it's 2018. I know that's pretty obvious, right? But, you know, there's companies where no one ever gets together. There's the company that one of the companies that I work with right now, because it's such a construction site. Like, I want everyone together right now, right? I want everyone there. I want us to be in the middle of this tornado right now, because I barely get enough things done, you know, with all of us, right? Versus, you know, having all these remote employees. So I'm trying to steer them away, you know, from remote employees right now. Don't hire remote employees, not yet. Wait 6 months until you have it in play. Then you can have people in different regions or satellite offices, whatever you want. But so that's why there's no one size fits all, and you have to really look at the dynamics and say, this just doesn't feel right. And then you have the founders that have very strong opinion, that may be wrong, but they have strong opinions, and so you have to work with them, right? And now they're coming around going, really, why am I paying $150,000 for every person that can spell Java in Charlotte, right? I can probably find different people somewhere else. But that's, you know, that's an evolution, right? So, thank you, really, very much. Hope you guys